Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Empire of Light, which we've just seen. It's the third in our unofficial trio of movies about the magic of cinema. Although this, I have to say, is really, I think, been misadvertised. The advertising really was selling it as the magic of cinema, the magic of the movies. And here it's definitely an element, but in the fullness of the film, it's one of many elements, and quite a small one, I would say.
I was surprised that it was as much as it was, because what I'd heard from people was how refreshing to see a film that's about the people working in the cinema instead of the magic of cinema. And actually, the magic of cinema ends up kind of taking quite a considerable role in the film as well.
Towards the end, yeah. So it's set in Britain in the 80s, in the very early 80s. It was filmed at the Margate Dreamland, I think the cinema is. They never say we're in Margate, and the cinema is called the Empire here. So
Margate looks beautiful.
Yeah, Olivia Colman plays the duty manager at this cinema. What we see is her opening up the cinema at the start of the film, all the lights coming on and so on, and we see the kind of majesty of the place. And it really is a beautiful old cinema.
It's gorgeous.
And we see it as a place of work. So we meet the projectionist, played by Toby Jones. We meet the various staffers. We meet the manager, played by Colin Firth.
We're told their wages, £4 a day.
Yeah, £4.50, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of that. So this is a film which is heavy on the nostalgia of the 80s. If you know this era in Britain, then there's hardly a shot in the film that isn't reminding you of something very vividly. So there are lots of shots, particularly early on, of all the sweets in the counter and all the old packaging. We see a kind of lilt as it was, 1981 and so on. That will all be kind of jumping out at people who know this stuff very well. And that thing of, £4.50 is a day's wage, and people will be remembering that a cinema ticket is £1 or £1.50. That a box of Maltesers is 20p. Like, all those things are always kind of jumping at you. And you could hear the audience. We were at the Mac, because it's not showing at Cineworld, and the audience was fairly full. And full of people.
And we were the youngest people there.
I certainly was.
Bitch.
There were lots of people,
I was the second youngest person.
There were lots of people who obviously know this era very well, and you could hear them remembering it when things were popping up on screen. You could hear them murmuring and mumbling to each other and chatting.
Yes, I was involved in that too. I mean, the film is set when I was 18, and I remember all of the films that are being screened. Private Benjamin and Being There and the Blues Brothers and Stir Crazy are the ones that are most often referenced. You see posters for Warren Beatty films and so on. So it is that era. But I must say, it's the third film about cinema that we've seen. It's the only one that you said with relief at the beginning, it's only 2 hours, because all the others have been 3 or more. And actually, this felt by far, to me, the longest of any of them. I couldn't stop looking at my watch. I thought it was, deadly dull and banal, and I hated it.
Oh, right. I was really into it. Surprisingly so, because I really wasn't expecting to be. Let me finish saying, kind of setting it up. So we've met all the members of staff. We've had our nostalgia hit, although it keeps coming. And a new member of staff joins, who is Stephen, played by Michael Ward, who is black. And that is quite unusual. Everyone here is white. And his race is important. The National Front has a presence in the film, let's say. But he begins a relationship with the Olivia Colman character. Olivia Colman is the reason, I think, that I found it so easy to get on with this film. Because she is such an empathetic presence. Such an easily empathetic, open presence. And her character is not a million miles from other characters that we've seen her play. She particularly reminds me of the character Harriet that she played in Green Wing, which is where I kind of first saw her, really, or knew that I saw her some 15 years ago, maybe, where she was this kind of office worker in a hospital, and she was kind of constantly put upon. She had all these kids, she had a husband who didn't seem to care about her, and she was constantly kind of denying herself happiness. She's very good at that sort of thing, Olivia Colman, and there's some of that going on here.
Well, so much so that I was beginning to think you're beginning to recognise all her tics.
Sure.
Yeah, and her vocal inflections and some of her expressions. I mean, I liked her in it. I mean, in fact, I think I liked all the actors. And I was thinking about Sam Mendes, that, he always ensures he's got a great cinematographer. So the film is full of gorgeous images, like beautifully lit. The lighting is gorgeous. But actually, I thought they were empty, that they weren't expressive. And I thought all the actors were wonderful, but I thought the direction was terrible. The film never got into a rhythm. There were kind of like really long stretches where you thought it was like really predictable, or things were taking too long, where there was a lingering on an actor's face, or setting was used as theatrical background in a theater, right? It never, to me, felt alive at any point.
It did to me when their relationship begins.
I didn't like that either. I don't see why you couldn't have shown that relationship between them unfolding as one of, I don't know, feeling or friendship. Or I didn't like the way that the sex scenes were handled. I thought it kind of put Olivia Colman to disadvantage, right? And it didn't answer questions. You could see what she sees in him, right? But why does someone as gorgeous as Michael Ward see in her? It just didn't make sense to me, really.
I don't think his character is fleshed out nearly well enough. He's not fleshed out at all, really. And he's kind of a cipher, really, to reflect her. He's the foil, really, to her. Because it's not that I don't think that Olivia Colman is lovable or you could be attracted to her or anything like that, but you do need to see it from him.
Yeah.
Understand it from him. It's not just that she's quiet and mousy and she kisses him and then she's nervous about it and everything. Like, you need to get a better feeling from him why the feeling is reciprocal.
I mean, I think she's very beautiful, but she is old enough to be his mother, so you've got to get some sense of what he finds in her that you don't see.
I mean, actually, it struck me that it's a reverse Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing. Like, you get these films. Zooey Deschanel was the kind of queen of these films sort of 10 years ago, where a girl shows up and she's kind of full of life and she has colourful hair and this, that and the other, and she will brighten up a man's life and make him realise there's more to life than this, that and the other. And this was like just a gender swap version of that, really. Because the thing about the Manic Pixie Dream Girl sort of type is... it's a type. It's like they're not fleshed out characters. They're there to help someone else achieve a thing. And that's kind of what's going on here. So the only difference here, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is a sort of a Manic Pixie Dream Boy.
Except he's not so manic or pixie either.
Yeah. But he has that thing going on. He's the person who gives her life, makes her free to express herself.
Yeah, except the film also does something else, because certainly racism, the rise of the National Front, the place of the travails of black people in this culture are at least as important as any other theme in the film.
Yes.
Right, and they are his. So the thing is that he is made to play those without actually playing a character, really.
Well, that's it. Again, in those, he's playing a type. He's playing the black representative, the black person who receives hatred from white supremacists. And he's, when racists approach him and are vicious to him, as we see a couple of times in the film, he doesn't get much of the film doesn't give him response, if you see what I mean. Like, it doesn't. He's a cipher for just responding to there's a black guy being hounded by skinheads. It's very sad, and I want to see the character personally respond. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I really hated it, and I found it really dull. I suppose I wish I'd hated it a bit more. At least it would have been exciting. So I think it was more dull, than hateful. It wasn't hateful, but I just found it supremely dull and exemplifying all of the things that I really dislike about British cinema. It's almost a cliche of a certain kind of British cinema, that relies on actors, that is very theatrical, that lacks dynamism and rhythm, that doesn't know how to create movement and drama cinematically. It's overly reliant on actors. Its idea of the image is to create pretty images, which, Deacon certainly succeeds in creating very memorable images. but I don't think they convey anything. Well, like, I suppose you get the sense that, you know, the cinema is beautiful, that it's in a beautiful setting, you know.
You get the feeling of it being a place of safety and home. The lighting inside is all orange and rich tones, and outside is the seaside, and I mean, even when it's daylight, it's still kind of blue and grey and colder. The film's delineating those spaces.
Yeah.
With the light.
I thought some things were just awful. I mean, it was very interesting, right? Because when we saw the Spielberg film, The Fabelmans, yesterday, and there's that wonderful John Ford monologue I was saying, you know, tell me where's the horizon? Yeah, kind of.
He says, when the horizon's at the top of the frame, it's interesting. When the horizon's at the bottom of the frame, it's interesting. When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit.
Yes, well, this film, you know, I thought was like that.
This film was a middle of the frame horizon.
Middle of the frame horizon kind of throughout, really.
I was actually looking, right, because of that yesterday, and I thought, I mean, the thing about that John Ford bit in The Fabelmans is you can certainly see there's a kind of rule of thumb truth to it, but also it's reductive and kind of silly, right?
Of course.
And so I'm looking for it and I'm going, you know, when the horizon's at the top and bottom, it is kind of interesting. And then those shots, you get these kind of establishing shots of the cinema, and the horizon is conspicuously in the middle. I'm going, that is boring.
And it's not just that. I mean, you know, the scenes where the skinheads invade the cinema.
Yeah.
Right. A better director would have made those so much more intense and scary and dynamic. You know, I thought, isn't it terrible that, you know, you have all of these skinheads invading and you're finding it quite dull, yeah?
Yeah, or at least predictable. I mean, that is the word to... Actually, last time we talked about Sam Mendes...
I meant visually dull and actually dramatically dull.
Well, last time we talked about Sam Mendes was when we saw 1917, which really surprised you in particular, because you're not someone who's used to liking Sam Mendes' films. And one word that you used, which I thought was kind of perfect for him, is obvious. His films are obvious, and there are things in 1917 which are quite obvious. That thing with the milk, you know, and feeding the baby. The fact that the story does that is obvious, and what it's kind of doing with it is obvious, and that's kind of what's going on here. So, you know, the National Front comes by, and it's obvious what the film is showing you, telling you how it's doing it. There's nothing that interesting or creative about it, but that's not to say that when the film is doing those things, I don't find effective things about it. And in the end, I found it moving, even though right at the end, obviously spoiler territory, we're right at the end of the film now, when he's on the bench saying goodbye to Olivia Colman's character because he's going off to college, you know, I'm screaming at the film, just hug. You know, and of course that's what it wants me to be screaming. And then she runs to him and they hug, and even though I don't think it was filmed as well as it could have been, actually, it could have been made more moving. Still, when they hug, I get a little intake of breath, and you know, and so the film is doing the most plain, obvious, predictable things,
but also thin.
But they worked for me. I still had sympathy with it all. So.
Well, I didn't, and I thought there were values in the scene that could have been brought out more to the fore. Yeah, kind of, and also interpersonal things. You know, does he slightly want to get rid of her? Is she too clingy? Will he ever return? Will they meet again? I mean, those are all questions that kind of should be overhanging and, you know, creating tension and friction and, you know, making the scene kind of come alive. And they're largely absent, you know. So I thought it was of the utmost banality, and yet with a sheen, the audience responded to everything. Right, so I think, you know, the average age was about 70, and they, you know, it's what I call a Leamington Spa film. It's the kind of film that's made for a middle-aged Leamington Spa audience.
Yeah. In
the middle of it, you know, they read Wordsworth, they read you a poem by Auden, and they end with a poem by Larkin. Right, kind of. You know, Middle England kind of.
Yeah, exactly. The ones we studied them all at school. Like the three poems you remember from school sort of thing. Yeah, it definitely has that going on.
It's so banal.
Sheldon, friend of ours and film dude, wrote a really interesting post about this on Facebook, because as he said, the conversation has been going on Facebook already, and we're kind of later to the party than everyone else, because a lot of people have seen this. And it was the most fabulously nerdy thing, where he was writing about his memories of cinema going in the 80s and what matched from the film and what didn't, and particularly someone who knows cinema and knows the workings of cinema, as he and so many of kind of his friends and friends of friends, my friends of friends at least, you obviously know these people better than I do. They were sharing their memories. And I think it's interesting that it's about memory, right? It's the memory of going to the cinema. And of course, the thing is, the more accurate your memory, the more you'll find to disagree with. But it has this, it's a memory of what life was like then. I'll give you a sense of a couple of things that Sheldon said. The first thing was the loose popcorn. He said, I don't remember loose popcorn from the cinema in 1980, 1981. It was all in packets. And a lot of people kind of concurring with this. What about the Kia-ora? I didn't see any Kia-ora. I've never known a poetic projectionist. They're practical types, not given to ruminating on the metaphysics of optical illusions. So it was lovely, because Toby Jones is the one here, and who was in the trailer, saying the magic of 24 frames a second, the optical illusion that brings life and stuff. And you go, of course, these practical people, they work with machinery.
Well, I don't know. I mean, just because they're practical doesn't mean
No, sure.
they don't have a poetic side.
There are all these questions about how we can operate two cinemas on his own. This question of it being a two-screen cinema anyway, and actually previously a 4-screen cinema, and we see this disused upper floor.
I mean, obviously my only experience is Canada.
Yeah.
But that is the time that the multiplexes came in. And it's exactly at that period. And there was a whole bunch of them built. So my experience of cinema is one of queues and, lots of customers, and the opening of, the Cineplex in Montreal, which had 9 cinemas of various sizes, and they were showing art films alongside the other ones. And so actually one of the things that I couldn't understand, which I'm sure is the cultural difference, is why the cinema was always so empty. Yeah, because, in that same period, the ones in Montreal were definitely full, right? And we did have loose popcorn, and we made our own. There was a machine constantly popping corn, which, I've never seen here. Which makes
these days it just comes out of bags, and I think they microwave or something.
Yeah, it makes me nostalgic. In fact, I was an usher in a cinema pretty much during this period.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it wasn't quite 1980. It was in 1982, I think, for Scarface. And there was certainly no nice community feel about it. It was like you went in, you did your hours, you went home, and you tried not to be, brought down by the boredom. I got fired from it because I was caught reading a book because there was absolutely nothing to do, right? Like, once you took the tickets and sat people, right? And then I'd always wait until the chainsaw scene, right? And I'd watch until that. And then, try and be invisible and read a book somewhere. And I got caught and I got fired. So I didn't last very long in that. But, there was none of this kind of cozy, supportive kind of atmosphere in my experience of it.
Yeah.
It was one screen, so there weren't that many people working on it either. It was the Odeon.
Michael writes in response to Sheldon complaining that how can one projectionist be running all this? He says there was automation and cake stands, which meant you could do it by yourself. And basically it was interesting to kind of get all of these. It obviously opened up people's memories of this, right?
Sure.
And the more that
which it's meant to do. That's the film's main. I wouldn't say achievement because it's kind of cheap, but that is its drawing card. Yeah, that is how it pleases the audience.
And there was obviously a lack of satisfaction in how well it did that by our friends on Facebook, who have quite clear and strong and informed memories of this era. But I also felt from the audience who we were watching it with, they felt an enormous amount of satisfaction. They were kind of reliving that era, and they were happy to be.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
So
it felt quite effective to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I suppose it's an audience for the film. It's not a very cineliterate audience. I think, just critically, the film has a great kind of central theme, which is, a woman's revolt and a woman's hurt and, being driven to insanity by patriarchy, right? And how she, copes with that and then, doesn't quite, changes course. Yeah, isn't quite on the mend by the end, but, she finds a way of changing that course. And I think it kind of throws it away, really. It doesn't know what to do with it. So the central themes, really, are Olivia Colman really being destroyed by men, Yeah, and not just by men, but patriarchy, really. I think the film is clear about that. It's not just that this man did this or that. It's the whole kind of ensemble, and how she says at some point, that she won't be commanded or something.
Yeah, when they're making the sandcastle.
When the sandcastles, right?
I'm not building to instruction. Right?
Yeah. So there's that, and then there's the thing about racism, and I don't know if the film just doesn't quite know how to connect them, really, because they're both kind of left floating and dissipating, and I also think that the film is overly gentle with its central coming together, right? Because so you see how the Michael Ward character is careful when he's in public with her, where she's oblivious to it largely. But the film doesn't dramatize that either, Kind of, there's no scene where actually them being perceived as a couple is an explosive moment, right? It's all, you're just shown the fear of it being kind of, something potentially.
Well, the most you get is when they embrace right at the end, and you get a couple of people on benches surrounding them, looking at them like, that's weird. And that's about.
So I just thought it was like really banal.
Yeah. Well, the thing about those competing themes of kind of patriarchy and racism, the film is at least, I think, clear about the kind of impact of racism on its characters. The thing about patriarchy, I find much more muddled. Like, the film is telling you that it's about patriarchy and about the impact of men on the Olivia Colman character, but mostly through when she gets angry at a couple of points and kind of manic. Well, she's manic depressive, clearly. She has bipolar disorder. We see her being treated with lithium. So although later on when she's sectioned, they say it's because she's schizophrenic. Maybe that was how it was called then or understood then, but certainly lithium I understand to be a treatment for manic depression. But the doctor, the doctor that we see her going to right at the start, who's the one treating her, actually seems to be someone who listens. He's not like a friend, right? He's still a kind of old, sort of slightly curmudgeonly guy, I guess. But he's someone who listens to her, and when she says that she's feeling better, and he kind of doesn't quite believe her, he asks her again, but then he believes her. Like, that's not actually something I would expect from the film that it's being critical of her treatment by a patriarchal system.
Well, there's a sense in which she's got experiences that were not shown, and then what we are shown with the Colin Firth manager is really quite, and you could see kind of an element of coercion. She never wants to do it, and she always ends up doing it, and kind of a lot of those things are internalized. But anyway, the film doesn't dramatize it very well, in my view. I just found it all dull and predictable.
I just find it more muddled than dull. I wanted a clearer sense.
Well, to me, the two things go together, and if the thing is that I end up looking at my watch thinking, when is this going to be over? Then the muddling becomes the dull.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be the same. That's all I'm saying. Like, it could be, something could be muddled, but in a way that's fantastically exciting, and you think maybe this will be worked out.
Be. Well, to me, this was both muddled and boring.
Yeah.
And actually, it is like a really good retort because, of the last three films we've seen, this is by far the shortest, and it was the only one that really bored me. I couldn't wait for it to be over.
Yeah.
You know what this made me think of? Is that I've always given credit to Sam Mendes for being so good with actors, The performers are often the highlight of his films. And yet this time, I thought the performers are all really great, but he betrays them, or he doesn't show them to advantage. I felt really sorry for Olivia Colman, to be humping Michael Ward, at a distance and kind of sordidly. I thought that was like completely unnecessary. And then you have somebody like Michael Ward who was so absolutely great in small acts. And of course, he's extremely beautiful in this. And this is all you can do with him? And actually, I also thought that with Colin Firth, you have like a huge star, a wonderful actor like that. And that's all you use him for? You couldn't give him a moment?
Do you remember that film Mothering Sunday that we saw, which had Olivia Colman and Colin Firth were a married couple in it, and I think when they're grieving the loss of a child or something,
I can't remember.
And she was kind of really torn apart by it, and he was sort of trying to keep their marriage together. They were wonderful in that.
Yeah.
And here it's really plain, really. You said that when I said the theme of the magic of the movies is kind of smaller than I think it was sold as. You were saying, well, it's still quite a part in the film. Let's think about that, because obviously we've talked about the cinema as a place of work. But the part of the story is Olivia Colman's characters learning to watch movies.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, when you're, the first 5 or 6 shots is like you go into the place and it is gorgeous. It's like an Art Deco masterpiece of a theatre. It's really beautiful. You're made to admire, like, the glass and, the reception area and the lobby and the interior. And it's like gorgeous, right? And there is a whole thing about cinemas, right? Because it's almost like going, I don't know, to Buckingham Palace, right? Except, the cinemas were people's palaces, right? So the building itself is a romance of the movies,
Sure.
The kind of ordinary working people had access to these spaces, and these spaces were theirs, right? And on top of that, like those scenes where you go into the projection box, I mean, I was really struck because, you have Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, and you have Ernst Lubitsch juxtaposed to Kenneth Williams, and, juxtaposed to Hitchcock, and, so, I mean, there is a whole romance for what all of these people signify. And, first you're allowed to, just your eye wanders through them, but actually later on in the film, they're really like close-ups of this thing, right? And, then you have Toby Jones's monologue about movies, and, it is, he actually says something like, it is marvelous, right? It's like 24 frames a second, and there's they're all still, and there's black in between, and, and it's all about the light. And I mean, kind of, you couldn't worship cinema more. And then, of course, she's saved by cinema at the end, right? Like, in a way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how much more romantic do you want it to be?
Yeah, it's the third film in a row that we've seen where we have important shots of people watching movies. I think Babylon had the worst of those when it was watching Singing in the Rain at the end, and it just kind of went on and felt quite unfocused. Obviously, it happens all through the Fabelmans because the Spielberg character is constantly making movies and watching movies. But here it's right at the end when she goes to the cinema and Toby Jones is about to leave, and she says, "Show me a film, any film." And I was thinking, like, he should just say, "I'm going home. I'll show you one tomorrow." But of course he does. He puts on Being There and we get these shots of her. I mean, it's shots that you've seen before. It's all this stuff when I was saying in previous podcast about how the advertising for this film looked like just those Cineworld adverts for going to the cinema. These are those shots of someone shot from below, looking up with a look of wonder on their face at the screen. We see the light coming from the projection box spilling overhead. But this actually did work for me here, as obvious as it all was.
It was obvious, and also I thought it was kind of slightly despicable, really, because my frame of reference at the moment is Charlotte Wells' After Sun, right, which we haven't seen together, and I don't think you've seen it at all.
No.
But it's about a father and son, and they go on a package holiday. And one of the wonderful things about it is the film never condescends to its characters. It doesn't say, "Oh, look at this cheap, tacky holiday," right? Like, you always get a sense of, they're there, they're having a good time. It's what they do. Right, the film doesn't condescend. I think this film condescends to its working class characters, in terms of how they live, in terms of how they act, in terms of their response, the tweeness of some other things. I think, this is not something Sam Mendes knows about or is nostalgic for, or it really is, kind of, aren't these little people kind of, human too? Is the way I read it. And I really I think it's a tone, it's condescension to working people that I really didn't like.
It's funny, I think, when it comes to talking up the value of going to the cinema, and that sort of thing. And funny, actually, we saw a trailer before this as well. Mind you, this was at the Mac, and you get slightly different trailers. We get these Pathé... Was it? No, it wasn't Pathé. It was Pearl and Dean, pre-roll things where you get interviews with actors and so on, kind of intercut with shots from the movies they're promoting. So Babylon was one. Puss in Boots was another. And we get these shots of, like, Damien Chazelle, Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas talking to their various interviewers, saying you have to see this at the cinema, and thank you for coming to the cinema and so on. And we were talking about that with the Fabelmans, Steven Spielberg, before the film starts. Thanks you for coming to the cinema. There is this insistence on it. It's funny because we do that all the time on this podcast. We're always talking about the value of going to the cinema and how it's so much better.
Well, because it has that value.
But like, it's one thing for us to do it.
Yes.
Maybe this is very hypocritical, but I do feel like when the filmmakers themselves are doing it in the ads, there is something quite desperate about that.
Yeah, there's desperate and feels slightly pathetic or something. It's like you feel if Spielberg or Antonio Banderas has to thank people for coming to the cinema, then the battle for cinema is lost. Really.
Yeah, and then these films themselves are kind of slightly clunkily at points saying, this is why cinema is magic.
Yeah, I can save you.
Yeah. That
well,
feels kind of desperate too.
Me. But, I mean, it actually does not jive with my experience. And it is a foreign experience, obviously. I wasn't raised in a British seaside town. But, I remember the queues and the excitement and the huge screens and the... and the huge cinemas and and Friends. Yeah, like there's very little joviality about the film going in this. You don't see like gangs of teenagers on a date night, right?
No.
Which is what most people would have been doing, right, on a Friday night.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, a few pictures that you see, one's just a drunk old racist, nasty bastards. You get, just a little old man hobbling into cinema, which is not to say he's not having a wonderful time, but then it's the focus is on, I suppose, then taking the piss out of him. It doesn't come across as the wonderful. I mean, I remember when I used to go, and I grew up in the 90s. I don't remember this era at all. I grew up in the 90s going to the UCI in Solihull, which was kind of a walk down from my house, and it's closed now. And that had some 8 or 10 screens in it. And they were down this long corridor. And I remember going to picking up your tickets, getting the popcorn, going down this long corridor, opening the thing. I remember the ident that you used to get for UCI, which you can see it on YouTube. It's this kind of electron going round, I think the word UCI in the middle, and it goes boom, as it comes towards the camera, and it gets bigger and bigger and louder and louder. It was fucking awesome and scary. And it was really fucking exciting every time you went to the cinema. Incredibly exciting, and actually much more so as a little kid. When I was old enough to sort of go to cinema myself and with my friends, it was you were going out with your mates and it was good fun, and we were seeing whatever the latest film was. But there was something very different about it when you were 8 years old and going with your parents. It was a treat,
sure.
And that was really magic. And going out on the Friday night and Saturday night when it was at its busiest.
Yeah, well, there was none of that.
No, there's none of that here.
So, and also, I mean, just to continue this idea of, the film kind of patronizing. In some ways, of course, there's a kind of modest, ironic undertone, right? So when Colin Firth has the big premiere of Chariots of Fire, and they're expecting all these stars and so on, and really the only person who you see is really the Lord Mayor, right? Like, there are no stars. And of course, he introduces by saying something like, "Welcome, to the regional premiere." Like, yeah. And actually, and of course it's treated as a joke, and kind of the audience reacted. It's not even a real premiere, or, it's not as if they decided to have the premiere in this town instead of in London. It's just the regional premiere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, it's kind of a joke that everyone responded to. But I also thought it's kind of part of that condescension of the film, yeah? You're not metropolitan, you're not sophisticated, this is just the little people in the provincial town, right?
The provinces, yeah.
And I hate that, really. Why are these, people in another geographical area not as worthy of human experience and human emotion? And, why kind of devalue it in those stupid and very British kind of cultural terms? It's one of the things I like least about British culture. Yeah,
it's very British because it's all coded. No. You're not actually saying you guys are a load of shit when you say regional premiere. It's obvious. If you know the code, it's obvious.
I know.
If you know how you're being spoken to.
Well, and the audience did.
Yeah.
So the film makes it complicit in this kind of denigration, of the regional and the local and the little people.
Yeah, it's the way you say something without saying it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
we are cunts, aren't we? Really. Yeah, there's no code in that.
Yeah, my overall view is that kind of, the film fulfills every cliche that I have of a particular type of British cinema, overly theatrical, grounded in performances, not cineliterate, class-based, etc., that I really don't like. And this ticks all the boxes for me.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that, and I shouldn't have liked it as much as I did. I just got on with it, and that's to my eternal shame as a little Englander, middle Englander, piece of shit who's satisfied with absolute mediocrity if it's got Olivia Colman in it.
All right, well, on that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, well, it'll at least be enjoyable to listen to.
Let's hope so. I mean, look at it. It's Roger Deakins, cinematographer. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the music. All for no...
I hated the songs.
To no effect.
I thought it was such a cliche of song use. Right, like Olivia Colman listening to Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell.
And then learning to listen to two-tone.
And Mickey Mousing emotion. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. I know. And I think the Roger Deakins thing is just, it's like predictably pretty. That's all it is. You go, his films are just beautiful and well lit, and you can see everyone's faces and all that kind of thing. It's predictably lovely. That's Roger Deakins. Why doesn't he push himself and do something?
Well, I mean, I think Deakins has to do what the director asks. I mean, and clearly,
no, but he can pick his projects, right? Surely.
Sorry,
he can pick his projects, right? Roger Deakins.
Well, I'm sure he can pick his projects, but at a certain point, the director has to say, "I want this image to convey whatever."
Yeah.
Right, and I think there's clearly a lack of directing, the cameraman here, because just the shots are beautiful.
Yeah.
Right, but if one is meant to get more from it than that they're really pretty, I didn't get it.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I don't mean he should do more in this film. I mean, it's obvious from the pitch for this film what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like. You could pick a different project.
Well, true. So you're saying why work with Sam Mendes at all? I can tell you, I wouldn't.
Kind of, yeah. Well, obviously, working with him on 1917 was an interesting challenge because it had that whole one-shot thing it was supposed to be doing, and interesting things with kind of shooting the flare thing, shooting at night and so on. So obviously that had its challenges. But this, where's the challenge, basically?
But still, the best thing about this film are those images.
Yeah.
Kind of that is what stays with you. They're really beautiful. They're evocative. You get a real sense of place. Kind of Michael Ward is really beautifully lit. Yeah, which, as indeed are all the other black characters in the film, which is, maybe one shouldn't compliment it because one should take it for granted, but it happens so rarely that it's still worth commenting on. Right? So I think, kind of credit to Roger Deakins, really.
Yeah.
It's just that the images, however beautiful they are, don't do enough dramatically for me.